Coming in at number 10 is Sync. Sync has the mutant ability of power mimicry, meaning, like Rogue, Sync can copy the powers of other mutants. Unlike Rogue, Sync has the benefit of not doing harm to whoever he is borrowing powers from, and he can also do it without physical touch. Recently though, after being resurrected, Sync got a bit of a power boost, and he may even become a new Omega level mutant. In the story, Sync not only uses his normal mutant powers to replicate the abilities of the mutants Sunfire and Cyclops while they were both nearby, but is also able to tap into Jean Grey's telekinetic abilities while she is literally all the way chillin' on Mars. Sync's growth in power post-resurrection was first noticed back in 2021's X-Men number 18, with Sync documenting that he was now able to sync not just with mutants, but other superhumans as well, which is quite the boost, and I think it just keeps going up and up and up. In the House of M alternate reality, Sync even got to the point of permanently retaining others' powers, which would be an incredible significant power boost as well. As a main member of the X-Men though, it's kinda hard to be surprised he's getting power boosts. So, yeah.
At number 9 is Eye-Boy. Eye-Boy is usually undervalued because he looks really silly, and I get it. He does look like if the drummer for Kings of Leon had 57 eyes, but you should never judge a book by its cover because although Eye-Boy doesn't look very menacing and seems rather confused most of the time, he's actually got a pretty good power set. He's got the ability to see just about anything, no matter how small and no matter how far. But on top of his microscopic and telescopic vision, he can also see basically every light wave there is, including X-ray, infrared, and thermal, among many others, including the magical plane as well. He also has night vision and even chemical detection. That's right, he can see pheromone secretions from people, giving him a tracking ability as well. Eye-Boy is just one of those sad cases where he's just too unsettling looking to really garner much respect for who he really is and what he's truly capable of.
Number 8. Domino. Nina Thurman is a mutant weapons expert and mercenary. Under the name Domino, she was introduced in the early 90s as a member of X-Force. Domino is a survivor of a bunch of unethical scientists who were trying to create the perfect weapon. Tale as old as time, really. But this means Domino has all the talents and skills you would expect of an expert mercenary or secret agent. But we're here to talk about powers, and Domino's are unique to say the least. Domino has probability manipulation powers, meaning she is almost always lucky. She exudes at all times a subconsciously activated field that alters the probability of occurrences in her line of sight in her favor. This means that whenever she is stressed, excited, or focused on something, things will go improbably well for her, and quite poorly for her opponents. Now there is a caveat to this. She needs to actively be trying to help herself for her power to work. So like, if debris is falling from the sky and was about to hit her on the head, she would still be hurt if she just stood still. But if she tried to avoid that debris, she would move perfectly to avoid each and every piece about to hit her. Now the full potential of Domino's abilities hasn't actually been fully realized yet, and Marvel has a knack for updating powers whenever they want. But with an ability to be lucky, there's only a finite amount of things you can't do.
At number 7, we've got Forget-Me-Not. Forget-Me-Not might also be a case of people judging a book by its cover because he doesn't really look too menacing, if we're being honest. But to be fair, his powers do also sound pretty lame at face value, so it could be that. Basically, this mutant can't be remembered by anyone he meets once he's out of sight. And as sad as this must be for him in his personal life, Forget-Me-Not can use this power to his advantage in a huge way in the right circumstances. In one case, he's even able to dupe all of X-Force when the team has to form an elaborate plan just to track him down. They're only able to finally catch him by having Dr. Nemesis record himself explaining to the team the existence of Forget-Me-Not as they search for him, and they keep watching it over and over again on their coffee breaks. And the only caveat to this whole situation is that the maintenance bots, along with, I'm assuming, any computer automated system, can remember Forget-Me-Not, which sort of weakens the potential for his powers in a way. So although he's more powerful than you might think, he's still got some vulnerabilities, but heck, everyone does, right? Forget-Me-Not.
Number 6. Dust. Created by Grant Morrison and Ethan Van Sciver for 2002's new X-Men number 133, Soraya Kadir is a young Muslim mutant who's enrolled in the Xavier Institute for Higher Learning. Now, she has largely been just a background character in the stories she shows up in, but Dust has been present for some of the largest events in recent X-Men history. Soraya was even one of the mutants who kept their powers after M-Day. Soraya is usually a pretty shy and quiet girl, but don't let that fool you. Her powers are no joke. Dust is able to transform into a cloud of sand, or dust, and even act as a violent sandstorm, literally stripping the flesh from her opponents. When she couldn't properly control her powers yet, Dust even unintentionally flayed two men alive after unleashing her power in an act of self-defense. Dust has also been shown to use her power internally, meaning like inside another person, entering her enemy's lungs and eroding them from the inside out, which is just a lovely thought. But wait! There's more. It also appears that Dust is immune to magic and telepathy based attacks in her sand form. The only problem is that if you pull out a hose or like a super soaker or something, she's pretty much done, as she's extremely vulnerable to water. She's a powerful mutant, but sorely underutilized.
At number 5 we have Marrow. I've covered this mutant in almost every one of my lists for the last few weeks now, and for good reason. She is just such an underappreciated mutant considering how versatile and honestly cool her powers are. And if you are a Marrow diehard fan, you know that she's had some difficulties with her powers, which might explain part of the reason why people tend to write her off. Initially, Marrow is unable to control the growth of her bones, which leaves her with some pretty painful and frankly terrifying looking struggles. But these days she's honed her powers and has become quite impressive as a result. Her extreme bone growth allows her to eject super durable spikes from her skin, and then she can use them as weapons. She is adept at hand-to-hand combat, so this, paired with her ability to literally grow her own weapons and then heal up without issue, makes her pretty unstoppable.
Number 4. Jubilee. Jubilee's energy plasmoids might actually be one of the most potent of the X-Men's arsenal. The plasmoids aren't fireworks, even though they look a hell of a lot like them. They're actually closer to superheated plasma. She can create a bolt of bright light, but she can also push out enough power to bend steel or destroy a tree. And with precision can even detonate microbursts inside someone's brain. So that's the amount of range we're talking about here. But that ain't all. It goes even beyond that. As Jubilee's Generation X instructor, Emma Frost, once speculated, if wielded properly, Jubilee could detonate objects on a subatomic level, meaning this unassuming mall rat can cause explosions of atomic proportions. She's a highly underrated character in the comics and gained a lot of popularity in the 90s thanks to the X-Men TV show. And while she's gone in and out of having powers, she still remains one of the cooler characters in the X-Men's lineup.
At number 3 is Morph. Morph might sometimes be underestimated because of his funny disposition and his somewhat harmless look. With one of the best personalities out of all the mutants in my opinion, Kevin Sidney uses humor to work through his internal issues after his mother's death. But externally speaking, he deals with his other issues using his totally underrated power set. Morph is a master shapeshifter, capable of changing his body and his voice to mimic those of others. Not to mention, he's also able to fly at speeds of 40 miles per hour and has a healing factor due to his ability to manipulate the makeup of his molecules. But what's coolest about his powers is that if he chooses to grow more muscles, his strength will actually increase along with his appearance, and even if he can't get his strength up to match his opponent, his defensive stats are insane due to his ability to absorb the impact of any physical projectiles by simply allowing them to pass through him.
Number 2. Gambit. Gambit has the really cool mutant ability of molecular acceleration, allowing him to convert the potential energy of a non-living object through touch and kinetically excite the molecules to the point that they explode. Usually when a mutant has an ability that manipulates molecules, they have a pretty vast array of powers. But for Gambit, he mainly uses his abilities as attacks, charging up his signature playing cards and bow staff. But in an alternate universe, there is a future variation of Gambit known as New Sun, who is what Gambit would be if he reached the full potential of his power. He can manipulate kinetic energy down to a molecular level. meaning New Sun can charge objects and living beings without being in contact with them. He can stop objects that are in motion and make still objects begin moving. He can turn into a wave of energy, letting him travel through space and other dimensions, and he was even able to defeat the Dark Phoenix in his own universe by himself. We do see 616 Gambit use a lot of the same abilities as New Sun in a fight between the two in Gambit's 1999 solo series, but just knowing the potential this awesome Cajun sensation can reach, ooh, it's spicy.
At number 1 is Chamber. Chamber is another underrated mutant with a power set that isn't quite appreciated the way it should be. It may have something to do with the trauma that Jonathan Starsmore goes through to acquire his powers, and further how that experience hinders him from achieving certain goals that other more accomplished mutants are able to. Basically, Chamber has what's described as a furnace of psionic energy stored in his chest, and when his powers are first discovered, this energy explodes out of him, destroying the lower half of his mouth and blowing a hole in his chest cavity, forcing him into intensive surgery to reconstruct the lost body parts. Eventually, he hones his powers to a point where he can aim psionic blasts on command, which is kind of like Cyclops, except in this case it's coming out of a hole in his chest. But what's more is that Chamber later learns that he's in fact a descendant of Apocalypse, and he is eventually properly reconstructed by Clan Akaba in the appearance of Apocalypse. Although this leads him into a depression, Chamber then gets a huge power boost from this modification and changes his name to Decibel before joining the New Warriors.
At number 10 is Bishop. Lucas Bishop is a mutant from the far-flung dystopian possible future where Hope Summers wiped out millions of human beings, resulting in the hunting and policing of mutants by Sentinels under control of the government. From just this alone, his knowledge of possible future events, he has a large amount to offer. But Lucas Bishop also served as a member of the XSE mutant police force, giving him a whole whack of experience using his abilities. Speaking of which, Bishop has the very useful mutant ability of energy absorption, allowing him to absorb the majority of types of energy, including magic, sound, light, psionic, psychic, and the list goes on, with no clearly defined limit as of yet. The energies he absorbs can be either environmental or directed towards him as attacks. He can then store or project that energy from his body in different ways, whether in the form of concussive blasts, energy rays, explosions, fire, plasma, and again the list goes on. But his favorite use is by projecting the energy out of his XSE weaponry. The nature of his powers makes it difficult to damage him with energy-based attacks, and almost any attack to be honest, giving him nigh invulnerability. But it also enables him to work well with any energy using teammates. Bishop can also store the absorbed energy within his personal reserves, whereupon the energy increases his strength, speed, stamina, and healing abilities. He is highly underutilized, especially recently, and I think that's gotta change. Alright, at number 9 is Polaris. Lorna Dane is not just a green Scarlet Witch, okay? In fact, she is the real, legit daughter of the anti-hero magnetic powerhouse Magneto. She's been manipulated, used, and been the victim of villains like Mesmero, Eric the Red, the Marauders, Zaladane, and Apocalypse. But she has been a member of the X-Men and more recently is a key member of the newest version of the team. She's always been prominent, but I think a little overlooked in comparison to others, which is a shame. She's actually quite powerful. As the daughter of Magneto, Polaris actually has pretty much exactly the same abilities as him. She can control and manipulate magnetic fields, allowing her to create force fields, fly on the Earth's magnetic field, emit magnetic concussive pulses that can overload and short-circuit electrical systems. She's able to manipulate the natural iron within the blood of living organisms, allowing her to reverse the flow of an entire crowd's blood in order to render them unconscious. She controls metal and magnetism just like her father, but hasn't had as much experience, so her potential has not been fully realized as of yet. Number 8. Forge. Forge has been an important member of the X-Men and mutant community for a long time. But for some reason, he always seems kind of unused, at least to me. He is almost like the X-Men's version of Q from James Bond. His mutant ability is that he is an intuitive genius. He can visually perceive mechanical energy, quote unquote, in action. He can just understand how something works by looking at it, as easily as breathing, for example. This power allows Forge to instinctively know and understand the potential and functional operations of any machine or technological device in his visual range. It's a skill that that, combined with his natural intelligence, allows him to conceive, design, and build mechanical devices and operate, modify, and disassemble existing technology to create countermeasures for it. It's pretty cool. It's almost hard to explain how this is a power, but it is. It's allowed him to subconsciously invent and construct something where someone else would have to think about it, design it, and then create it. He's been able to just do it, and then deconstruct it later to figure out how it actually works. He's created cybernetic systems, sophisticated holograms, and elaborate computer and fiber optic systems, as well as time travel devices. His potential is vast, and that's before you take into account his magical affinity. And at number 7 is Dazzler. Dazzler, otherwise known as Alison Blair, is a mutant with the ability to transduce sound into light. She's also a very gifted singer and performer, which she uses in tandem with her powers to just blow people's minds at her concerts. But she is more than that. She can take any source of sound other than her own voice, unless it's projected back at her, as light energy which she stores up and can use in a bunch of really cool ways. Obviously, using the lights she emits, she can blind adversaries, but she can also create therapeutic light to help allies. Her Dazzle Blast, which is either the worst name ever or the best name ever, is a light show so intense it overwhelms the nervous system of whoever is watching and can knock people out. She can also shoot lasers that can cut through solid metal and photon blasts that strike with concussive force. She can create quote-unquote light fog to hide allies. She can create force fields for offensive and defensive purposes, and she can even fly. She's become the Herald of Galactus in a What If comic, and she was actually one of the more impressive versions of Thor from God Doom's Thor Corps, even coming over to the 616 reality at one point. Dazzler is awesome and very underused. Coming in at number 6 is Mimic. As a child, a nosy and curious Calvin Rankin accidentally exposed himself to one of his father's experiments. Altering his body and triggering his powers, Calvin soon discovered he was able to mimic the abilities of others who were in his close proximity. He first appeared as an adversary to the original X-Men, copying and mimicking all their powers at once. After he reformed, he was offered a role on the team. Now, as a member of the X-Men, Mimic didn't really get along too well with his fellow teammates, but he was one hell of a powerful asset to them and was responsible for a few of the team's victories. Cyclops resigned as leader shortly after Calvin joined, and weirdly, Professor X chose to make Mimic the team's leader. Over time, other powers he has copied include the powers of Hulk, Banshee, Marrow, Gambit, Rogue, Storm, Colossus, Nightcrawler, Shadowcat, Pharaon, Megan, Kylan, Micromax, Rachel Summers, Wolfsbane, Pete Wisdom, Psylocke, Risque, Siren, Warpath, Sunspot, Cable, Caliban, Domino, Boom Boom, Richter, Cannonball, Shatterstar, Post, Blob, Mystique, Toad, members of the Crazy Gang, and so many others. The thing about Mimic in comparison to Sync or Rogue is that he copies skills and abilities as well as powers, and even mimics physical attributes, which gives him a degree of more versatility, at the cost of lower power levels. But he's still really cool. Number 5, Multiple Man. Multiple Man has such a crazy interesting power. Okay, so I should say for starters that he isn't technically a mutant. Jamie or James Madrox is actually a changeling, which is a sort of genetic precursor for mutants who gain their abilities at birth instead of having their X gene activated later on, like in puberty or whatever. For James, his power is that of duplication. He can duplicate himself multiple times upon impact, and each of his dupes can create one single dupe. One of the real benefits of his power though is that the Prime Madrox will retain any memories of his dupe's experiences. So let's say you had to read like 10 books in a week. Well, you could have like 10 dupes all read one book each, and then when they re-merge with you, you have all of their memories of each book, if that makes sense. Multiple Man is like an information gathering powerhouse. He can also use the ability to learn skills, like one of his dupes trained as a Shaolin monk and trained in meditation. One was a trained EMT, one audited an anatomy class for 6 months, one passed the New York bar exam, one claimed to be the world's greatest detective, and just stuff like that. In his self-titled comic from 2018, he even goes into a future world that is completely ruled by Magi, which is the plural for Jamie's dupes. I'd love to see his potential shown in the MCU or something, it would just be so entertaining. And at number 4, Blink. Do you know in the beginning of the X-Men Days of Future Past live action movie when there's that really cool fight scene in the bunker between some mutants and the ultra advanced Sentinels? Now you know that mutant that was firing out portals and stuff and doing all that Jazz, that is Blink, and she is so cool. Clarice Ferguson's power has a few different uses. Obviously, there are the bright pink portals, but she can also throw that same energy as a sort of missile that will teleport those, or even parts of those, that she hits. The range of her power is actually quite impressive, as it has a potential range of as far as the moon and back, which is pretty freaking far, if you know. With the potential of her abilities and the cool way it is used, and even just how awesome it looks, you'd think she would have done a lot more, but she seems to not really have a whole lot of meaningful appearances. Except, if you want to see her being as amazing of a character as she should be, find her in Age of Apocalypse. So cool. Number 3, Firestar. Another pretty powerful mutant who just hasn't had any key moments to speak of. Angelica Jones, also known as Firestar, has the awesome mutant ability of microwave energy manipulation and generation. She uses the Earth's electromagnetic field and converts it into microwave radiation. She also absorbs microwave radiation from her environment and from stars in the galaxy. She can then focus this energy at targets or to do different things. She can set targets on fire, explode them, and even melt them. She is consistently keeping her powers in check because she has the potential to damage the entire Earth and its atmosphere with her abilities, which is why she is even more powerful in space, where she isn't limited by the fragility of the Earth. Out in the cosmos, she has been able to easily produce an attack that injured Garthon Sol when he possessed the energy of the entire Nova Corps. And she also used her abilities to power a massive Shi'ar interstellar transport gate with very, very little effort. She's even been able to disrupt the psionic powers of others using her own power. Most impressively, Emma Frost. She is still young and learning to use her powers, but she needs to be more than just one of Spider-Man's friends because she is a powerhouse of potential. And at number 2 is Husk. Paige Guthrie is part of a family that has a lineage of mutant abilities. Sam Guthrie, Cannonball, Joshua Guthrie, Icarus, Melody Guthrie, Arrow, and Jebediah Guthrie, who doesn't have a superhero name. Paige's power is a wee bit unorthodox though. She has the ability to shed her skin, and by concentrating on specific chemicals or elemental formulas, she can cause the layer of skin underneath to be a different element or shape or state. She can become any solid that she has studied and can imitate metal, diamond, granite, wood, rubber, and even glass. She's been shown to turn into a sharp-toothed lizard once, which is weird. She doesn't have perfect control over her abilities at this point in time, but when she transforms, she obviously gains different abilities depending on what she turns into. She's granted herself super strength and durability, flame generation, and many other different things. Her shedding lets her get rid of dirt or sweat and even minor injuries, which is both cool and kind of a little freaky, but she has all kinds of potential if she is given the time to properly train her powers. And in at number 1, Megan or Megan or Megan or however you want to say it. If you were a fan of Excalibur in the late 80s and early 90s, then you'll likely know who Megan is. That's with 2 G's. Megan is a unique character like most of the mutants are. She's a mutant empath with the ability to shapeshift, but she is also an elemental of great power, and she's even got a dose of fairy heritage. Her list of abilities is a little hard to define, as it is with most shapeshifters, and it can even be augmented by her connection with the Earth. She is transformed into a Godzilla-like dragon that could breathe fire, and even a werewolf-like creature with all the enhancements that can afford. Megan has also shown through her environmental connection and mutant empath abilities to be able to adapt to situations and also to the emotions of those around her. So for example, she can grow gills and fur, or become prettier when those around her think she is ugly. She can also turn into other superhumans as well, gaining their powers but with less potential, which even worked when she became a female version of the Silver Surfer, which is kind of nuts. She is resistant to reality warping powers, and she even has a true form where she can manipulate elements, fly, and manipulate magical energies. She is a highly capable mutant and character. She just hasn't really done a heck of a lot since the 90s, and that's a shame. Coming in at number 10, it's Toad. Toad has been a member of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants, and by extension, a part of the mutant community for a hot minute. But in my opinion, Mortimer Toynbee hasn't really been utilized as much as he should be given his massive list of abilities. Toad has a degree of superhuman strength, specifically in his back and legs, which allow the little weirdo to jump around 25 to 37 feet, and he'll kick you so hard you ain't getting back up. He's got flexible bone structure, superhuman stamina, durability, reflexes, and agility. Toad, like a lot lot of super beings, has a regenerative healing factor, but unlike a lot of mutants, he has UV vision, a super strong 30-foot prehensile tongue, acidic saliva, sticky paralytical resin out of his pores, and pheromone secretion. I can understand why he isn't exactly at the top of the mutant landscape, partially because he's kind of really gross, and just overall unpleasant, but he does have a hell of a lot of abilities to offer. Number 9. Ricochet. Now, I don't know if this is cheating, because you slap some web shooters, super strength, and the ability to do everything a spider can on this mutant, and you basically have Spider-Man. In fact, the superhero name and costume used by Jonathan Gallo was originally used by Peter Parker as a secondary superhero identity when Spider-Man was framed for ending someone's life. But enough about Webhead. Jonathan Gallo is a mutant with the abilities of superhuman agility and reflexes, with his agility allowing him to jump long distances, and when he combines his powers, he can almost bounce off walls in a sort of, I don't know, ricocheting type movement? But that's not all. Ricochet also has another mutation in the form of his danger sense, which is totally not the same as spider sense, except it sort of is. It allows Jonathan to sense danger before it happens. Now with his agility, reflexes, and danger sense, this mutant possesses 3 of Spider-Man's more useful abilities, but he's just different and cool enough that I can still respect him as more than some cheap knockoff. Number 8. Lifeguard. Lifeguard, or Heather Cameron, arguably has one of the most useful mutant powers possible. Her ability is called Danger Detection Response, and basically what it means is that she can detect danger to her or others' lives in her vicinity, and she can literally evolve whatever powers are necessary for her to stop those lives from being lost. She can gain more than one power at a time and is able to control said powers after just a few seconds. It also seems to be kind of limitless in what she can do. Her situation biomorphic adaptations have taken the form of growing wings for flight, extra arms for carrying and super strength, her skin turning into a sort of golden metallic super awesome armor, gills for underwater breathing with her legs even turning into a fishtail for better swimming ability, as well as simply upping her strength level from normal to superhuman. It's almost too fitting that she was an actual lifeguard before her powers emerged. She's a literal lifesaver. Number 7. Forearm. Michael McCain is the mutant under the name Forearm, an exceedingly clever name as this mutant's ability is that Forearm has 4 arms. Oh boy. Alongside his 4 arms ability, Forearm also has access to super strength, stamina, and durability. Because honestly, Forearms isn't exactly gonna save him in the majority of mutant conflicts. That being said though, I would kill to have 2 extra arms. I just can't help but imagine how useful that would be. Add to the fact that your arms are super strong, not only can you make a peanut butter jelly sandwich while texting your friends and petting a cat or something, but you can also trade 2 extra fists worth of punches with some heavy hitting mutants who only get 2 hands. For Michael, when his powers are used in unison with his extra limbs, he is a formidable close combat specialist, able to hold his own against some of X-Men's own powerhouses like Rockslide. He was a founding member of the Mutant Liberation Front, and he is now happily living on Krakoa. Number 6. Nature Girl. Although Lin Lee started off at Jean Grey's school for higher learning, after she witnessed some of the horrible things humanity is doing to the earth and to nature, she would instead become an fighting back against humanity, which makes sense given her powers. Nature Girl's powers are directly connected to the natural world, so she can communicate, influence, manipulate, and control nature, living beings, except I guess not humans or mutants, plants, natural phenomena like the weather and geology of the earth, and the matter and energy of which all these things are composed of. Now that statement alone kind of encompasses a lot of different stuff. She can call upon animals and ally herself with them. She can make plants grow, move, and attack people. She can control the weather to a degree and heal nature to a degree too. She was on the run from Wolverine for a while and was able to get away from him a few times using her abilities. And she looks totally awesome wielding the Krakoan cudgel with her big antlers and the goat legs and stuff. Super cool. Number 5. Miranda. The only reason this character is on this list is because a lot of people have not heard of her. She doesn't even have a last name. Miranda had powers that appeared at first to be cosmic level reality warping. Warping on a level the Beast created the term Omicron level mutant to call her. He thought she was able to manipulate reality while somehow completely avoiding any damage to space or time, like when she has stopped the Juggernaut in his path by making a well appear right below him that he was falling down millions of miles. But what Miranda's mutant power actually was control over all of Marvel's continuity. She is the one who has been keeping all of Marvel's mutants young. She's the reason the old Nick Fury got replaced by Samuel L. Jackson, and she's the reason Bucky Barnes came back as the Winter Soldier. At least, she is in this alternate universe of Earth TRN 656, the one from X-Men Worst X-Man Ever. I'm just kind of curious to see if this ultra powerful mutant will ever show up in other stories or even the 616 universe at all. Number 4, Banshee. Sean Cassidy has been around for one heck of a long time in the world of Marvel's mutant community, and he has done some pretty prominent things, but his power doesn't seem like it's all that impressive, and he is kind of looked over when thinking about the mutants, but he shouldn't be. Sean has acoustic kinesis, an ability he does many cool things with. Primarily, Sean emits a sonic scream. Now the sound waves from this sonic scream have shattered solid objects, cracked skulls, and even liquefied people. But he has done so much more with this ability. He can ride the sound waves he creates using his suit to be able to fly at subsonic speeds. He can create sonar by sending out a pure signal note and listening to the returning sound. He can tighten the sound waves around himself and others to create sonic shields. And more than that though, he has been shown to affect the fluid inside people's ears with his sonic screams, being able to set them off balance and even render them unconscious. One ability that had me raising an eyebrow is the fact that Banshee can even subtly influence people's subconscious mind by changing the tones and vibrations of his voice, effectively using hypersonic suggestions and persuasive abilities. Don't sleep on Banshee, people. Number 3, Northstar. Jean-Paul Beaubier is an interesting mutant with a few different abilities. Northstar's main ability is super speed. Not really in the traditional sense of running really fast though. Northstar can propel his body at superhuman speed, becoming a living projectile, channeling a portion of the kinetic energy of his body's molecules in a single direction. It's even possible for him to reach 99% the speed of light in a vacuum. But if he were to do it on Earth or something, he'd not only damage himself, but could quite possibly break the planet. He can also super speed any part of his body, giving him superhuman reflexes and an incredibly fast metabolism to heal wounds. What's really cool is that since he is taking atomic motion from the muscles, his muscles become closer, making him superhumanly durable, allowing him to survive moving at the speeds he does without tearing himself apart. He also uses his ability to fly by projecting the kinetic energy downwards, which in turn lifts him upwards. Northstar used this ability to basically cheat as an Olympic skier, which is kind of really unfair, but whatever. And we haven't even talked about his photokinesis and concussive blasts yet, and we're not going to, so moving on. Number 2, Sage. Sage is a super genius with a brain more powerful than any computer in the world, granting her perfect memory and rapid analytical abilities. She can come up with the perfect plan in an instant, learn just about any skill without having to practice it, remember everything she's ever experienced, perform multiple tasks at once by allocating a partition of her brain to each task, and, thanks to training with Professor X, she can engage in telepathy. Her telepathic abilities allow her to detect minds and read them, project thoughts, astral projection, cast realistic mental illusions, and she even has a kind of psionic defense unique to her called her firewall. But it doesn't even stop there, as Sage even has some biokinetic abilities as well, including reading another mutant or person's genetic code and DNA, being able to literally see who someone's related to, jump-starting latent or enhancing current mutant abilities, and has complete control over her physical body, being able to expel nanobots from her body by controlling her immune system, almost like highly advanced antivirus. She needs more time in the spotlight, like desperately. And in at number 1 is Negasonic Teenage Warhead. You may remember Ellie Phimister as the super angsty Negasonic Teenage Warhead from the Ryan Reynolds Deadpool movies. And while that character was both hilarious and awesome, she is kind of pretty different in the comics. Obviously, she is still a teenager with that ridiculous yet awesome name, but her powers seem to be vastly different. Ellie's powers are psychically based, and primarily take the form of precognitive nightmares and premonitions, meaning she sees the future. Specifically, she saw disasters before they happened, which kind of explains the heightened teenage angst thing. But she would go on to start having glimpses of danger in the near future, which allows her to plan ahead or avoid attacks. She also possesses other psychic abilities like telepathy, telekinesis, and has been able to levitate. But maybe strongest of all is her abilities of reality warping and particle manipulation and absorption. Plus, some of the superhuman starter pack abilities including strength, speed, durability, and reflexes. As well as just being an awesome character, partially due to her texting movie counterpart. In at number 10 is Beltane. Beltane is a mutant you may likely not have heard of. Her real name is currently unknown, but we know she was part of a group of Romani gypsies. She was captured by the Latvarian monarch and awesome supervillain Dr. Doom and experimented on, which activated her latent mutant abilities, and also set off her desire to overthrow his rule with a group of other escapees. Now, Beltane's ability is the secret weapon of her group. She has the ability of fear projection, which means that she can physically project a manifestation of whatever the person she is facing most fears, psychically messing with and almost torturing her victims. So when fighting Wolfsbane, for example, Beltane made the hero see a projection of her not so nice father. Probably a mistake, as Wolfsbane eventually took her down in an animalistic rage, but hey, it's still a cool power. Coming in at number 9, Wolfsbane. Speaking of Wolfsbane, Rain Sinclair has the mutant ability that I wish I had when I was a kid. She can turn herself into a wolf at will and can even go into a transitional form that is basically a close to a werewolf without being a werewolf type of thing. In fact, she is basically a werewolf, but with none of the drawbacks of the monster. She retains all her faculties, minus not being able to talk and just being a little bit feral, and is not forced to change only at night. Rain grows much larger than her human form when she changes and gains access to some enhanced strength, which, coupled with the body of a wolf, grants her enhanced speed and reflexes as well. She gains heightened senses similar to a wolf. The thing with Wolfsbane is that she is both a wolf and a human, so she gains the benefits of both, like almost stacking on top of each other. Unlike wolves, or humans for that matter though, she does have an enhanced healing factor and enhanced vision as well, so double thumbs up. Number 8, Abigail Brand. Abigail here is an interesting character. She is technically a human-alien hybrid, as her father hails from the planet Axis, but it's actually her human mother who Brand inherited her mutant abilities from, that allowed her to join S.H.I.E.L.D. and then Sword as an agent and hero. So what are said abilities? Well, she has a form of pyrokinesis known as tactile pyrokinesis, which means that Brand can coat at least her hands in flames that are potent enough to burn through most metals via tactile contact. She can use her abilities to warm up others, but has enough control that she can also set others on fire. So she has some versatility with said abilities. I somewhat kind of prefer her form of pyrokinesis because, I don't know, I just swear there are way too many fire-based heroes who seem to all do similar things. So at least Abigail has her own brand of fire. Sorry, the dad jokes are in full force today. Number 7, Primal. Adam Berman first appeared in X-Men Unlimited number 16 in July 1997, and his story arc was one I actually had a good time reading. It was oddly unique, at least to me. Adam is a mutant, but his ability is a transformative one, and he can easily hide it, which allowed him to kind of play himself off as a non-mutant even though he was trying to join the Xavier Institute. That's what I gathered at least. It was kind of confusing. So you should read his story, but we are here for his abilities, not his story. And those said abilities almost remind me of other superpowered beings like the Hulk and even the Lizard, because Adam can transform into a totally primal reptilian-like form, growing about 50% bigger than his normal self and gaining red glowing eyes. But his physical enhancements are quite impressive. His strength boosts to around a level 10, with the highest level being a 100. But level 1 super strength is capable of pressing 800 pounds through a 25-ton range, so level 10 is nothing to scoff at. Look, just go read his story, okay? Number 6, Adam X. Another Adam! Almost like I liked that name or something. Adam Nuramani is honestly a bit more interesting than the last Adam though. He was a genetically created hybrid of both Emperor Deken of the Shi'ar Empire and Catherine Summers of Earth, created in an attempt to introduce more genealogies to the Shi'ar Empire. Now just as his origin is unique, so are his powers. Adam has the ability of electrokinetic hemopyrokinesis, or if you don't want to hurt yourself like I just did, you can also say sanguine combustion, which also sounds super cool. It basically means that he can send an electric surge through oxygenated blood, which leads to ignition of the electrolytes present in said blood, causing a person to burn from the inside out, which could result in a little subtle warming effect, or it could completely disintegrate a person. So there's a lot of wiggle room here, which is cool. But thanks to his Shi'ar side of things, he also has enhanced strength, agility, reflexes, stamina, speed, vision, and healing. So couple all that with his awesome fighting skills and the cool cybernetic retractable claws, and Extreme is someone you don't want to mess with. Coming in at number 5 is Shatterstar. So I was like this close to including Longshot on this list, but he doesn't even consider himself a mutant, and there's a whole bunch of weird time mojo verse stuff going on, so instead I'm going to do his father and or son, which is a whole other thing in itself. Look, all you need to know is we're talking about Shatterstar. Gavidra 7 learned the arts of battle as a warrior in arenas on Mojo World, where he developed both a sense of honor and incredible fighting skill, but those aren't his abilities. He possesses a large superhero starter pack: superhuman strength, speed, agility, stamina, durability, senses, reflexes, agility, dexterity, coordination, balance, plus a regenerative healing factor and even enhanced learning ability. Curiously though, he actually has hollow bones, which makes him a shim lighter than you would think he is, but also further boosts up his natural physical skills. The cool part of Shatterstar though are his Mojoverse swords, which he can use through his mutant ability to channel powerful vibratory shockwaves, which can be absolutely devastating but also kind of drains him of energy. But after his Mojo time, he can now create X-shaped portals as well that have to be linked to another person who acts as an anchor for said portals. These also drain him of energy, and he has a cooldown of about like 4 days before he can do it again, because this powerhouse needs some kind of balancing. Number 4, Aurora. In the last part of this series, we talked about Northstar, but that mutant has a sister, and guess what? Surprisingly, the mutant gene runs in the family. That shouldn't be surprising really, because genes and all that. Wow, this is a horrible intro. Janine Marie Beaubier, otherwise known as Aurora, can generate a bright light, which according to the wiki is equivalent to 500,000 foot candles. Or if you aren't weird, it's about as strong as a lighthouse light, which is also an extremely weird frame of reference, but I digress. She and her brother can both do this by varying the rate of acceleration of the molecules of their bodies out of phase with one another, thereby generating a cascade of photonic discharges. The light can actually do some interesting things, like she can make a calming light that can even interrupt psychic control, or she can make concussive light blasts. Or, which is even cooler, she can even create lightning blasts that actually do some considerable damage. Like her brother, she can also move incredibly fast, and thanks to her molecular manipulation, she can also be extremely durable, heal quickly, and even withstand all the G-force of moving so fast without doing those insane weird breathing exercises that pilots have to do. Number 3, Phantom X. I honestly kinda dread talking about Phantom X, but I also completely love this guy. When I first read a comic with him in it, I did not fully understand his power, and I still don't really, so now I'm gonna try and explain something to you that I do not fully understand myself. Cool? Cool. So basically, Phantom X, or Charlie Cluster 7, or Weapon 13, or Jean-Philippe, if that's what you want to call him, was experimented on by Weapon Plus and was genetically grown and evolved using Sentinel technology. Thanks to this, he actually has, or had, 3 brains for independent parallel processing, nanoactive blood, and his primary nervous system is actually a detachable techno-organism called EVA, or EVA. So there's some stuff to unpack there. EVA, or EVA, can fly herself and can generate bioelectric charges to be used as weapons, with Phantom X being both telepathically and symbiotically linked to Eva. His multiple brains allow him to think like a sort of supercomputer similar to Sage, but it also gives him access to 2 extra personalities, a charmer and a super deadly mutant hunter. He can create extremely powerful illusions and can enter a trance state where he can rapidly heal, and his self-supremacy over his body and mind allows him to overcome pretty much anything to complete his mission, including mind control. I can't talk too much more about him without taking forever, but know that he has enhanced senses, is a dope fighter, and does not create any kind of smell. Please look into this character and try to make sense of him, because I need help. Number 2. Somnus. Carl Valentino is actually a new member of Earth's Mutants, first appearing in Marvel's Voices Pride #1 in June 2021. But canonically, he's been around for a while. He and Dakin actually had a one-night stand in 1967, a one-night stand in which Dakin dreamt of them having an entire life together, which caused Dakin to retrieve Carl's body in the modern day and bring it to Krakoa for revival. Except this dream was caused by Carl himself. That's because Somnus has the mutant power of Wannaromancy, which I'm almost certain I mispronounced, but I'm kind of proud of myself that I think I didn't. This means he has the ability to enter, broadcast, and even control dreams at will. He can render his opponents unconscious and is also able to bring others into his dreamscape. It's such a unique and interesting power, and it can allow him to live entire lifetimes within a dream, which in my nerd mind tells me he can learn and improve upon skills while dreaming, but don't take my word on that, I just kinda made that up. Only time will tell the multitude of ways his power shall be used in the future. And finally, at number 1 is WizKid. A computer genius and novice inventor, Takashi Taki Matsuya kind of has an unfair advantage in the inventor game. That's because WizKid here has the ability to technoform materials and rearrange parts of things to function to his specifications, even to the point of being contrary to the laws of nature and science. And he's even recently learned how to manipulate plants and even other mutant powers to create new technology. With this ability comes a natural psionic aptitude for seeing how components can work together, which lets him make things work even better using his mutant power. As for the using of other mutant abilities, it basically means he can see the use of individual mutant powers as components, coming together as a larger machine, or even being able to guide the linking and combination of mutant powers to work collaboratively together. So he's almost like a power strategist, which is really cool, on top of the awesome technology he can already create. All this basically comes together to make WizKid someone you would absolutely want on your side, wheelchair and all. Number 10. Vanisher. Vanisher actually has the mutant ability of teleportation, but unlike mutants like Nightcrawler, Vanish's teleporting ability is completely psionic in nature and actually causes him to go through a series of extra-dimensional portals. But he does it so quickly he didn't even realize that was what he was doing. There is actually an instant where he tries to explore his powers more and stops his teleportation partway through, ending up trapped in the Dark Force dimension by its inhabitants. Vanish can also use his ability to bring a certain amount of mass other than himself with him when he teleports, which in one case allowed him to teleport himself and about 8 others from Southern California to Genosha. To add to that, Vanisher can actually also teleport any part of his body, kind of like how the Spot did it, but he does it so little that it's almost kinda not worth mentioning. Number 9. Tag. Brian Cruz, the mutant known as Tag, has the awesome ability called the Pariah Effect. Now this ability allows Brian to psionically tag a target, causing that person to emit a psionic signal that could make everyone, or even a select group of people in an area, either run away from or run towards and dogpile on top of the selected target, or who he likes to call it. The distance of this game of tag was about 100 feet, and everyone affected by the ability, excluding the one tagged, was fully aware of what they were doing while not being able to control their own actions. It's such an interesting ability, and it's fun as well because he can also tag a target with the effect of having that person run away from themselves, so they would just be uncontrollably running until he cancelled the effect. He was part of the group called the Helians until he lost his power on M-Day and passed away in a missile attack shortly afterwards. But luckily, Tag was resurrected on Krakoa, and hopefully we will get to see him use his abilities again at some point. Number 8. Hijack. Marvel's mutant David Bond actually has absolutely nothing to do with British 007s. Instead, David is the mutant known as Hijack with the technopathic ability to assume control over vehicles. It's kind of so oddly specific, and it makes me wonder if the ability works for things like bicycles or like scooters or something. This power gives me more questions than answers, to be perfectly honest. Look, he's controlled buses to ram into sentinels, and he's even been able to control an entire SHIELD helicarrier, and even a fleet of them at one point, which is definitely no small feat of its its own. His abilities have even allowed David to control technological suits of armor, but curiously he couldn't control sentinels. Now, while his power could be used in quite a lot of different ways, David wasn't always the most useful of characters, so we didn't get a whole ton of him to analyze. Number 7. Manifold. Originally, Manifold was thought to be a teleporter, but his powers are much more than just teleportation. Eden actually has the ability to communicate with the universe and kind of ask it for certain things, and in turn the universe would change and mold to do what he wanted. So for teleportation, for example, he's actually kind of creating the Einstein-Rosen bridge and folding space to allow himself, or whatever he wants, to be teleported from wherever he is to wherever he wants. It's the same thing when he creates portals. He's used the ability to fold space around him to make him appear invisible, and he can even fold space around beings and things, like when he teleported a bit of the sun's plasma to his hand and folded space around it so it wouldn't be able to hurt him, which is a crazy thought. Even though this ability only works in his native reality, it seems like potentially an incredibly powerful ability. Number 6. La Bandera. First appearing in Wolverine Volume 2 number 19 in the December of 1989, La Bandera is said to be the daughter of a supporter of Fidel Castro, and her mutant ability is basically to be an awesome leader, which in turn apparently powers her secondary mutation. So her first mutation is as an empath, able to influence the emotions of others, which she mainly used to inspire people to fight against oppression. And then in turn, the amount of followers she had would power her energy projection powers, which she would channel through her staff. So if she has no followers, then there's no energy projection. But if she's using her empath abilities properly, then she should always have followers, right? She began fighting dealers, who she followed to the South American country of Tierra Verde, which at that point was ruled by a harsh and corrupt dictator. She teamed up with Wolverine to fight the dictator, but unfortunately she passed away at the hands of Zeitgeist in 1995 and hasn't really been talked about since, like, at all. Number 5. Blindfold. It's interesting that Blindfold wears a blindfold, as she was born with no eyes or eye sockets for her to blind with a fold. But don't think being unable to see is some kind of handicap. Blindfold is wildly powerful. Blindfold's powers are psychically based and are strongest in telepathy and wielding astral energy, which she can make solid to do a number of things, including creating armor, weapons, force fields, and energy blasts, and using it to cast her astral projections into the physical world. Using her telepathy, sometimes in conjunction with the astral plane and its energies, Ruth is capable of astral travel, psychometry, precognition, retrocognition, clairvoyance, psychic possession, mental influence, and she even has some chaos manipulation. She also has a degree of telepathic resistance, meaning telepaths can't read her mind, but they can still possibly attack it and possess it and all that fun stuff. And in at number 4 is Destiny. After talking about Ruth, it seems like a logical shift to talk about her possible great-grandmother, Irene Adler. Irene Adler, otherwise known as Destiny as a mutant, has a long history going all the way back to the 19th century, and she was even in a relationship with Mystique all the way back when. While she has her eyes, unlike Blindfold, Irene is indeed physically blind. But it's okay, as she could still see the future. That's because Destiny has the mutant power of precognition, able to mentally scan the probability spectrum of alternate futures, and by concentrating, she could focus on only the most probable alternate futures. She could scan the alternate futures that existed from 1 second away up until those that existed 15 minutes away, but she could be 97% accurate if her predictions were 10 seconds away or less, allowing her to basically see what she was doing even though she couldn't see what she was doing. Number 3. Exodus. This character is one a lot of you may actually know is pretty powerful, as he does have a seat on the Krakoan Quiet Council and is insanely capable. Exodus actually began as Grand Duke Benet du Paris in the 12th century as a nobleman hailing from the medieval France. He was sent to fight in the Crusades in the Holy Lands, and on his journey out there, that's when his mutant powers awoke. And he even gained further enhancements from the mutant apocalypse, becoming one of his champions before being entombed until the modern era when Magneto awoke him and teamed up with him. He is one of the most powerful mutants alive. He is an Omega level psionic, using the abilities of telepathy, telekinesis, teleportation, and empathy. His level of telekinesis is so fine-tuned that he can even use it to manipulate things on the molecular and subatomic scales, allowing him to disassemble or reassemble complex devices, explosively even, and he's even been able to do this gaining control over electrons in an atom. He can create force fields, concussive blasts, electromagnetic blasts and fly at speeds of around Mach 2. But he further uses his telekinesis to enhance his strength, speed, and reflexes to an impressive degree, as well as using his abilities to heal himself and others, resurrecting and fixing the atoms that make up our bodies. And that's all alongside his other abilities, including enhanced durability, longevity, healing factor, and a psionic vampirism. Number 2, Cosmar. When Tashi Rapina first showed up in 2020, her mutant powers caused a little bit of a problem. Tashi has Wanaric reality warping, essentially meaning her dreams branch out and affect the reality around her, trapping her and whoever is around in the dreams. Now, people trapped in there can be physically or telepathically affected by these abilities. So, for example, when she was having a nightmare, some guards discovered her and were turned into monsters by her abilities, but it only added to the fuel of her nightmare, making things a lot more worse. Her abilities can also show others their dreams or fears. It took Wildside using their abilities to make Tashi's nightmares into a pleasant dream to free those who had been trapped inside. It's a bonkers power, and its emergence affected her physically too, which led her on a mission to try and find a way to look more human again. But her ability is definitely one of the more unique ones I've seen, with those who become trapped in her dreams being connected in one neural network with Tashi and used as a power source. Number 1, Danny Moonstar. Okay, a bunch of you guys mentioned Danny Moonstar in the comments of the last part, as there was a mutant that had a similar shtick. But Danny's powers are much more advanced than those of Beltane. While Beltane can create illusions of people's fears, Danny's powers only started here, but now she can create three-dimensional images of certain visual concepts from thoughts and emotional impressions within the minds of either herself or others. It used to be just fears, but then it moved on to deepest desires, and then as she grew, so too did her power to allow her to create images from thoughts and less intense emotions. So, as an example, as this actually happened, say Danny and Cannonball walk into a high-class hotel dressed casually. So to blend in, Danny used the image of what a well-dressed hotel guest would look like from the mind of the desk clerk and disguise both herself and her teammate in those images. She could do this with multiple people at once as well, creating illusions that were almost real to the person whom they belonged. But with a little help from Professor X, she was able to create an image that was physically tangible. That's her potential, but so far it's only happened the one time. Normally her power is used more as a psychological tool or trick, but it's not her only thing. Having powers that are psionic in nature, she can actually focus her powers into energy arrows, which can stun someone by disrupting their central nervous system or force them to relive a traumatic memory. And as she grew, these arrows became more capable of physical harm. Number 10, Emma Frost. She's probably the biggest name on this list. It almost feels like everyone knows her powers, but someone suggested her in the comments, and well, she's awesome. Emma Frost possesses telepathic abilities on a similar level to Charles Xavier. She's been referred to as an Omega-class telepath and has demonstrated the ability to stalemate Exodus and overcome telepaths such as Nate Gray and Rachel Summers through greater experience and skill. With her telepathy, Emma Frost can create psionic shields, telepathic cloaking, telepathic illusions. She can absorb information and upload information into others. Emma can project one's astral form from their body onto the astral planes or the physical planes. She can inhibit others' powers, induce pain, erase a person's memories, and heal mental trauma through psychic surgery. She has intuitive multilingualism, mind control, can create mental links, induce mental paralysis and sedation. She can alter others' minds, cause a kind of mental amnesia. She can telepathically detect and track others, not to mention produce psionic blasts and psionic lightning. And that's not mentioning her secondary mutation of a diamond form. This grants her super durability, strength, and stamina, as well as psychic immunity, but at the cost of her psychic powers. Number 9, Black Tom Cassidy. Black Tom Cassidy is the cousin of Sean Cassidy, who's Banshee, and he was originally a longtime crime partner to the villain Juggernaut. But his powers are interesting to say the least. Originally, his mutant power was bioorganic thermokinetic blasts, generating concussive blasts of force through any wooden medium. Normally, it was forgive my pronunciation, a shillag, which is a traditional Irish wooden fighting stick. Tell me if I messed it up in the comments, please. After a fight with Cable, doctors grafted a wood-like substance onto his wounds, healing him and allowing him to channel his bioblast directly through his fists. But as a result of a genetic virus, the substance spread over Tom's whole body, turning turning him into a Groot-like looking dude, which actually worked to his benefit as the secondary mutation gave him plant growth, allowing him to grow to immense size, superhuman strength, a healing factor, chlorokinesis, which is control over plant life within his vicinity. He could distribute his consciousness among plants he controlled, and Cassidy could drain the life force of organic beings. He eventually returned to a human form but kept the capacity to control plants to a limited degree, mainly focusing his powers on wood specifically, and using the energy channeling aspect of his powers, he could increase his striking power to generate protective shielding. Number 8. Sebastian Shaw. Sebastian Shaw is a mutant that you'll probably best recognize for being the Black King of the Hellfire Club, or the guy who somehow took out Darwin in the X-Men First Class movie. I still think that was dumb. His powers are actually a bit different from that movie though. Shaw has the ability to absorb energy, specifically all forms of kinetic energy directed at him, and use it to enhance his strength, speed, and stamina. This includes physical damage such as that sustained in battle, and kinetic blasts such as Cyclops' optic blast or Gambit's explosions. That's why you'll sometimes see him punching walls, being hit by his own underlings, or allowing himself to be hit by his foes in order to build up more and more of the kinetic energy to empower himself. He can also absorb and use other forms of energy such as electricity and magical energy, as shown in Avengers Academy when fighting Hercules. He can build up and store this energy and release it whenever he chooses. His biggest power, however, comes in the form of being such a powerful and influential figure in the Hellfire Club. Number 7. Jason Wingard. Jason Wingard, otherwise known as Mastermind, is basically an illusionist, but a very, very powerful one. He can psionically manipulate the senses of other people, causing them to see, hear, touch, smell, and or taste things which do not actually exist, or see, hear, touch, smell, and or taste real things in ways that they would not do naturally. So, for example, he can seem to make a solid wall appear in an empty space, or he can make himself look and sound like a different person, or look and feel like a wall, or even seem invisible. Since his power only affects the mind, his illusions cannot be recorded with cameras or anything like that, but his power is so strong that even if his victims know they are being subjected to an illusion, they will still react to the illusion as if it were reality, unless they can rid themselves of all suspicion that it is indeed reality, which sounds a little confusing. Basically, if Mastermind creates the illusion of a wall, most people, even if they know it's an illusion, will still be unable to walk through that wall. His most famous usage of his power, in my opinion, is when he attempted to manipulate Jean Grey, which led to that whole Dark Phoenix thing. Good job, dude. Number 6. Sunspot. Roberto da Costa is another mutant that a lot of people have heard of, especially in the more recent stories that have been coming out of Marvel. But that doesn't mean everyone knows his powers. Bobby da Costa's mutant ability allows him to store solar energy in his cells through a similar method to the way we store energy when we eat food. He can then release it when necessary to enhance his physical strength, usually with the side effect of his body being cloaked in darkness because he drains all the ambient light from his skin, which sounds really cool. The enhancements to his strength through this radiation have allowed him to knock down an alternate universe Hulk, even drawing blood and even restraining Gladiator of the Shi'ar. But other than his physical enhancements, he has also used the energy he absorbs to fly faster than light speed, use pyro and thermokinesis, firing blasts of heat and dark solar plasma, as well as using photokinesis directing light. He's also incredibly tricksy, displayed when he recently manipulated Iska the Unbeaten. I just love this character. Number 5. Trevor Fitzroy. Trevor here, who goes just by Fitzroy, is actually from Earth 1191. There, he was the illegitimate son of Anthony Shaw, the Black King of the Hellfire Club. Trevor's mutant ability was to drain other living beings of their life force, converting it into energy and absorbing it into himself, usually disintegrating his victims. With this life force, he can do a few different things, like opening temporal wormholes to travel across time and space, teleportation, shifting objects into different time frames, altering the flow of time to return people or objects to a previous incarnation, and freezing people in a type of stasis. The thing is, the usage of his power depends on the life force he absorbs. So for example, one wormhole would be equivalent to one person's life force. It's a little scary, to be honest. He did get a big power boost in the Bishop the Last X-Men series, where he tries to become time itself. He is a super cool and super dangerous character, definitely definitely check him out. Number 4, Harold Leland. Harold Leland was an alcoholic and obese corporate lawyer and also a mutant with the abilities to increase the mass or gravity of a person or object within his line of sight. He can use this ability to increase mass all at once or over time, slowly increasing the more a victim struggles. The power has shown to even break the ground beneath a target depending on the strength of that ground. So for example, there was a time that he sent Wolverine from inside the Hellfire Club all the way through the floor and the ground into the sewers. Also, the human targets would suffer great strain in their muscles, particularly in the heart, with the possibility of suffering physical damage. And if Leland uses his power on an item, that item could crumble if it wasn't particularly durable. Leland joined the Hellfire Club, an elite social club for the rich and wealthy located in New York's 5th Avenue, under Sebastian Shaw. He isn't the most impressive fighter, but his ability has come in handy more than a few times. Number 3, Emma Steed. Emma Steed is actually the Black Queen of the London Hellfire Club. If you are noticing a lot of Hellfire Club members here, that's because there are a lot with very cool powers and not a lot of people know much about them at all. For example, Emma Steed here has a rare form of telepathic power called psionic skinning. This basically allows Emma to create blades of pure psionic energy to attack and disable her foes. These blades aren't purely for physical attack. They actually allow her to do a number of things like warping the minds of people, igniting pain sensors, destroying physical portions of their brain, and destroying psionic forms or astral projections. Using this ability, she was able to de-life the Shadow King, who is an incredibly powerful telepath. As a secondary result of her powers, she is basically immune to any type of psionic or telepathic attack, with her presence being absolutely destructive to telepaths. Number 2, Cora of the Burning Heart. Can we just get an applause for literally the coolest name ever? Like, Cora of the Burning Heart. That's awesome. Cora of the Burning Heart is a mutant from Morocco where she served as an assassin and primarily used her power only to boost her own abilities in battle, thanks to the Iraqi being really stubborn, honor-bound fighters. But Cora's abilities can indeed help others as well. Cora's heart is an internalized combustion furnace, which generates life force energy. Thanks to that energy, she gets this really awesome looking flaming skeletal appearance, and she uses this constant energy source to give herself incredible physical capabilities, as well as boost up the powers of others around her to even greater heights. She was a member of the X-Terminators alongside Cable, and she is also a part of SWORD. Also, Cora of the Burning Heart. Sorry, just wanted to say it again. Super cool. Number 1, Amelia Vaught. Amelia was a mutant born with the ability to transubstantiate solid matter into vapor that she can control, and honestly, it's such a great ability. Seeing the things she can do with this ability is really cool. I said she can transubstantiate matter, and that is including herself and other people. When she turns herself into vapor, she is obviously unharmed by physical attacks, but can then fly through the air as vapor and pass through small holes or cracks. But the vapor is still physically there, which means she can still move objects as vapor. She has also turned her allies into vapor to get them out of dangerous situations, substantiating them beside her. And she's even stolen weapons off of enemies, turning them into vapor, which she then reformed in her own hands. But wait, there's more. Using the astral plane, Amelia is able to transport herself and anything else across the surface of the globe in an instant, even summoning distant people to herself by teleportation, converting them into mist and then bringing that mist into her presence to be reformed. It's just super cool. Coming in right at number 10 is Richter. Julio Richter has a pretty interesting mutant power. Richter can manipulate various aspects of the planet itself. Originally, his powers manifested in simple seismic energy, allowing him to create earthquakes, shock waves, and rudimentary transport of earth matter. However, after Richter's powers evolved, he now has the ability to remotely terraform the ground around him in a much more precise manner. He can toss rocks around with precision or will the ground to open up like a tunnel. But he also has some skill with plants, controlling vines and other plants to ensnare his opponents. Julio also gained magma kinesis after being trapped under an active volcano and just rising out of it, riding on top of the magma like an absolute badass. More impressive than that though is that Richter's powers have created a psychic / empathic bond between himself and the primal life force of Earth's biosphere, allowing him some clairvoyance and mysticism. Definitely one of the coolest characters I have never heard of. I just wanted to pause here to say if you're enjoying this list so far, dropping a like is all you have to do to help us out and let us know that this is what you want to see. And on that note, we're gonna get to number 9, who is Gorgeous George. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and when I behold George Blair, gorgeous is not the word that comes to mind, but nonetheless that is the name he holds. Gorgeous George's body is composed of this tar or putty-like stuff that, through his thoughts, can be expanded, morphed, and reshaped in any way he wants. Using this ability, he has been able to turn his entire body into a puddle or make himself extremely slippery to avoid capture. Side note, becoming extra slippery just makes me like ick, you know? I don't like that slipperiness. George is also very hard to injure. He can reconstitute parts of his body and can even bend to dodge attacks. The slippery thing also kind of helps with this as well. He has also once tried to choke Strong Guy by using his powers to enter his lungs, which is just a terrifying thought. On a lighter note though, his arms are actually longer than normal because he forgot their normal length after getting drunk with other members of Mr. Sinister's Nasty Boys. Well, that's kinda cool. Number 8, Thumbelina. Are you getting tired of seeing all these super powered beings who look like they just walked off a runway? Well, lucky for you, there is Christina Anderson, who goes by the moniker of Thumbelina. She's short, she's stout, she's slow, and she's always being made fun of. But she has a pretty useful mutant ability. Thumbelina can shrink down to 1/4 of an inch, making her an excellent candidate for missions of espionage with the Mutant Liberation Front. The best part about Thumbelina's powers though is that she retains her full-size strength in her miniature size and has even been shown to actually increase in strength as she shrinks. So make fun of her all you want, but Thumbelina has proved instrumental to the Mutant Liberation Front team, even being the reason their first mission was such a success. Number 7 is Strong Guy. I kinda can't believe I haven't talked about Guido Carosella yet. Despite this guy's massive hulking appearance, he is one of the most entertaining mutants around. Essentially, Guido, who goes by the name Strong Guy, has the ability to absorb kinetic energy and use it to enhance his physical strength. Now at a base level, he can lift around 50 tons, which is already more than a lot of superpowered beings. But using his kinetic absorption, he can boost that strength up to far above 100 tons, making him one of the strongest characters in Marvel Comics. Unfortunately, Guido's body suffers from his mutation. Storing the kinetic energy he absorbs for more than 90 seconds will permanently distort his body in very painful ways. The distortions he's already suffering from cause him to be in constant pain, which, being the great guy he is, pushed him towards being absolutely hilarious to hide his pain. And coming off of that, number 6 is Layla Miller. Of all the mutant powers I've come across, Resurrection is one that doesn't actually happen too often. But Layla's resurrection ability is an interesting one. It comes with a major side note. Layla has the ability to resurrect dead beings, restoring their bodies and their consciousness, but not their soul. Without their soul, the resurrected being will have no conscience or morality. We saw this happen both with Strong Guy and Trevor Fitzroy, who were resurrected by Layla, who eventually experienced drastic changes in their personality without their souls. Another key factor about this resurrection is that it can only be performed within minutes of the individual's death. Layla claims she can also reverse this process, taking back the life that she gives. Another interesting note for Layla is that during the House of M, Layla was resistant to Wanda's reality warping abilities and retained all of her memories. She could even give others back their memories. She's also been to the future and studied magic with Dr. Doom, so like, that's cool as well. Coming in at number 5 is M. Just the letter M. Monet St. Croix has an interesting past, and honestly, her family is a big part of that. Her brother is an incredibly powerful bad dude who trapped her in a different form where she is known as Penance. As Penance, she has diamond skin, a telepathic resistance, and super sharp claws. M can even combine with her younger siblings Claudette and Nicole, but on her own, Monet is essentially a near perfect being. All of her physical and mental skills are greater than the natural physical limits of peak humans, granting her super strength, speed, agility, stamina, senses, intuition, and a genius-level intellect, as well as reflexes that even allow her to catch bullets. She can fly at supersonic speeds by sheer force of will, she can read minds, project her thoughts into the minds of others, and defensively mask her mind against telepathic intrusion, and she has even displayed some telekinesis. And on top of all that, she has the power of being ridiculously good looking. Lucky. Number 4, Marius St. Croix. I could talk about Monet St. Croix for a long time, but her brother? He is just terrifying and needs to be discussed. Marius, who eventually goes by the name Emplate, has the ability to siphon mutant energy by feeding on the bone marrow of mutants using his super creepy feeder mouths that appear on the palms of his hands. Emplate needs the energy from mutants in order to survive, almost like a mutant vampire. And like a vampire, if Marius siphons all of a person's energy, his victims will pass away. Also like a vampire, if Emplate drains only part of a victim's energy, he can gain a kind of psychic control over their mind, and can cause the mutant to become an energy vampire just like him, but under his control. Kind of like a vampire's familiar. Interestingly, when feeding from a victim, he actually cancels out their powers and copies them for himself. After multiple feedings, he even gains their power permanently, like he did with Penance's diamond skin. And at number 3 is Chamber. Chamber, or Jonathan Evans Starsmore, discovered his powers when a blast of psionic energy burst from his torso, destroying much of his chest and his face. It turns out that Chamber is actually literally composed of that same psionic energy, and his body just acts as a shell for it. When his powers burst out of him, the wound was replaced by a constant glow of psionic fire, leaving him unable to speak. Instead, he can only communicate telepathically. Additionally, he does not eat, drink, or even breathe, as he has no organs. Chamber constantly created and unleashed psionic charges of energy that could strike with a volatile force, being projected as a blast from his chest, a series of guided streams that struck specific targets, or as a massive eruption striking in all directions. Now, if he was given the time to train properly, Chamber could have potentially been one of the most powerful mutants to walk the earth, but unfortunately he's not. Number 2, Mikhail Rasputin. As the older brother of both Colossus and Magic, Mikhail Rasputin has quite the mutant genealogy, and he ain't no chump himself. Mikhail is an alpha level mutant with the ability to manipulate subatomic matter and warp energy. His power hasn't really been properly defined, but he could forcibly fuse a man to a tree and could manipulate Bobby Drake, Iceman's body. Speaking of Iceman, Mikhail also seemed to display some form of enhanced perception, being able to see Bobby's potential just by looking at him, and he could show him how to use his powers in better ways. Mikhail has also used his power to fire energy blasts, tamper with people's powers, and most prominently for teleportation. He could transport himself as well as others by opening up dimensional portals by ripping away at the subatomic wall of space, which he did when the Soviets sent him into space and blew up his ship. Sorry. And coming in at number 1 is Sienna Blaze. Sienna Blaze has incredibly strong destructive abilities, thanks to the fact that Sienna can disrupt a planet's electromagnetic energy spectrum, absorbing the energy into her body and then releasing it, usually in destructive blasts. Sienna's released energy would tear a hole in the local electromagnetic field, which is bad, in case you wondered, with repeated use of her power theoretically being able to destroy the planet. She can also use the magnetic energy to fly at 150 miles per hour, or impressively to teleport herself along the planet's electromagnetic field. Again, every time she teleports, she permanently damages the electromagnetic field at the point of departure, causing a pretty strong explosion. As an example, Sienna shot down the X-Men's Blackbird in Antarctica. Sienna then ambushed Cyclops and Storm and nearly completely took them out until Professor X prevented her from using her powers. Then Storm, Cyclops, and Professor X managed to defeat Sienna, except she just teleported away and left a massive explosion in her stead.